welcome to the Think About Energy Summit, jointly hosted by the Colorado Energy Office and America's Natural Gas Alliance. I'm Pam Roth of WPX Energy, and I lead ANGA's state team here in Colorado. I'm proud to say that here in Colorado, stakeholders from all different backgrounds have made our state a national model for how to do things the right way on regulatory efforts, on innovative new ideas for power generation and transportation, and on working together to find pragmatic solutions to keep this incredible opportunity moving forward. Along with our partners, ANGA Colorado's dedication to promoting greater use of this resource has been steadfast, and thanks in part to the support of a committed national team back in DC. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce our first speaker, Marty Durbin, President and CEO of America's Natural Gas Alliance. An energy industry veteran, Marty hitched his wagon to ANGA this spring after an impressive run at the American Petroleum Institute as Executive Vice President of Government Affairs. A tireless energy advocate and industry leader, Marty is a familiar face for natural gas in the media and before Congress. He understands that this is an opportunity too enormous to pass up for cleaner and less expensive power generation and transportation, for our energy security, and for manufacturing opportunities that were all but gone a decade ago. Not content with transforming our energy future, Marty also serves as chairman for a wider circle, an organization supporting families emerging from homelessness. As a member of ANGA, I am truly pleased to introduce Marty, whose leadership, determination, and real optimism in the face of both the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. Please join me now in welcoming Mr. Marty Durbin.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Pam. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks to Pam and to WPX. I also want to thank the Colorado Energy Office for partnering with us on this. Of course, the rest of the ANGA members who are here today and helped put this on. And also the exhibitors who are here with us today. I think it's great to see such a good turnout across a broad swath of the economy here. Let me start by telling you a little something that happened on Friday, just of last week. So in Washington, as you can imagine, we've got several different energy emails that get pushed out every day from our little Inside the Beltway publications. Well, National Journal is one of them. And they sent out what's called the Energy Edge Friday morning. The subject line on the email said, "Natural gas won the week." And the subheading under it says, "The best PR is the kind you don't have to do." Now, I don't say this to brag. The point I want to make here is that what the reporter was referring to is that early last week, we had two government reports come out. Yeah, the Energy Information Administration on Monday, I believe it was, reported not only is natural gas production actually it's greater than was expected, and it's getting more efficient all the time, but they also noted that carbon emissions are at 20-year lows, largely due to greater use of natural gas. The following day, EPA followed up with its own report to say that just in the power sector, carbon emissions were down by 10% over 2 years, again, driven largely by greater use of natural gas. My point in all this is that while there's no question that we will continue to safely and responsibly produce this natural gas resource across the country, the fact is we're no longer debating the question of whether or not we will produce this resource. That's been answered. We're now moving to how do we do it the right way, and how do we take advantage of the great opportunity we have with this resource. And the fact is that these opportunities are here today because this industry is an incredibly innovative industry that's brought technology to bear for horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing that got us to where we are today. What we're seeing is that innovation just continues at a pace that is unbelievable. I mean, almost on a daily basis, we're seeing the process improve. The wells are getting more efficient. The environmental footprint is being minimized. So it is technology that's going to drive us forward. I think 3 to 5 years from now, the way we produce energy from shale is going to look far different than we do today. And of course, it looks far different today than it did 5 years ago. But that's because of both the competitive and innovative nature of this industry. So the opportunities we have are, again, across the economy. You look at power generation. Today, natural gas accounts for about 26% of electricity generated in the United States. That's only going to grow. And not only are we seeing the carbon emissions reduced, but you're seeing criteria pollutants, NOx and SOx, and other emissions being reduced at the same time. In the industrial and manufacturing sector, the chemical industry alone is looking at putting, they're keeping a tally, and right now they've got more than 100 different projects on the books that could be $83 billion worth of capital investment here in the United States, all because of the abundance and affordability of natural gas. Transportation, of course, you see the vehicles behind you. Great opportunities here. While we're all fortunate, or we're looking forward to when we can see a lot more of the light-duty vehicles like what you have behind you, and it was great news to hear just in the last 2 months. Not only Ford is making an F-150 available to the consumer, GM's making an Impala that's a biofuel vehicle, but the opportunities in the high horsepower area, over-the-road trucks, rail, marine. And we're going to see these things happen very quickly here and really start to change the game in that area as well. And of course, we're seeing consumer savings. I mean, right now, the latest numbers show that consumers households are saving on the order of $1,200 a year, again, because of the lower cost of natural gas. So we've got an abundant, affordable, clean, and domestic resource that we can now all take advantage of, with the industry doing the right thing, our partners in government, and our customers in the different market segments working closely with us. But let me get to why they actually invited me to come here today, and that's to introduce our keynote speaker this morning. Governor Hickenlooper is fond of describing himself as a recovering geologist. Well, recovering or not, I think Colorado is very fortunate to have somebody with his background and experience. Being an energy-producing state, to have someone who knows how this is done, I can tell you he's been a very constructive partner for the industry. He's been a leader in developing effective regulation that's being administered fairly. He's been a leader in the conversion of state municipal fleets to CNG. He and his colleague in Oklahoma, Governor Fallin, initiated a memorandum that now has 22 states. 22 governors have signed on to an agreement to try to bring more CNG vehicles into state fleets. He clearly understands both the benefits of this resource, but make no bones about it, he will certainly hold us accountable as well. So it gives me great pleasure, and it's an honor to introduce your governor, John Hickenlooper.
Thank you. There are enough bright lights up here so I can see the motion. I suspect you guys stood up, it's a good thing I didn't see it, or I would get panicked. Embarrassed. Somebody asked me what happened to my hip, that I needed major hip surgery with the crutches and everything. And one of my staff said that with the number of times I put my foot in my mouth, what would you expect? So let's see if I can get these balanced off to the side and make a good, beginning to look a little bit like a drilling rig off to the side. Thank you, Marty, for the introduction. Having people like Marty Durbin who really understand the balancing that takes place in creating a fair regulatory environment. They understand that, that there are various self-interests that all have to be recognized and at the table, makes things infinitely easier for those of us that are right in the middle of the fray. And having Pam Roth here, someone like her from the industry who understands that same balancing act makes everything work. I think the opportunity to have all of you here at one time is important. I think having this conference here in Denver says a lot, as opposed to having it in Washington. And hopefully, I'll lobby hard that we have many such conferences in Colorado. But I especially like the subject this time. Think about energy. Think about energy, and I think, as Marty was saying, with energy in the middle of such innovation, right, and so much opportunity for, and not just the kind of peaks and valleys that we experienced in the 80s and 90s, but long-term, sustainable reserves of natural gas at what would have been unbelievably affordable prices. I know that some people in the room think that they're a little too unbelievably affordable. Hence the efforts to try and get more natural gas vehicles, et cetera. But I think it is an appropriate time to stop and to think about energy. And I think the geologist in me does tend to zero in on the facts. And I've had some reinforcement, actually. I've been telling this story about my son Teddy, who is now 11. Last spring he was 10, complaining about school, and I pushed back about how much he'd looked back on these years. And he looked at me and goes, "Daddy," I mean, the whole thing took a turn for the worse. Teddy said, "Daddy, what do you do every day in work that's so hard? Make decisions?" He goes, "Daddy, get the facts. Make a decision. Check, next." I said, "Well, Teddy, it's not quite." He goes, "No, Daddy, get the facts, make a decision, check, next." And then he goes on, every day I've got to go into school and learn something completely new I didn't know existed the day before. If I don't get it completely right, my next day is misery because everything's based on the day before. After 20 minutes, I admitted fifth grade was harder than being governor. But the next day, as often happens, I figured out what I should have said. And the challenge today is that we don't all use the same deck of facts. Right? 30 years ago, at least, we had the Encyclopedia Britannica, we had Walter Cronkite, we had reliable sources of information that pretty much everyone trusted. And right now, when you look at all the bloggers and the extreme points of view on all sides of pretty much every difficult issue, no wonder it's hard to get to decision points, right? And it makes rulemaking and making sure that we have the industry perspective and the community perspective and together in the same discussion makes it all that much harder. And I think part of what I've tried to do and what our administration's been trying to do is make sure that everybody has the same facts. And I certainly think that around natural gas, the facts are pretty clear. There's no denying the promise and the tremendous power that affordable natural gas creates. It's clean, it's inexpensive, creates jobs here. I think it makes the world a safer place. We are moving at a rate, and it's hard, graphs, it's hard to get people to look at rate of change. But the rate of change at which we are moving towards energy independence in this country is staggering, right? I don't think we've ever had it like this since we lost energy independence, whatever it is, 50 years ago. I think just in Colorado, the facts are pretty impressive. And according to the report from the, if this was an off-sea rig, that would have been great trouble. According to the report by the University of Colorado's Leeds Business School in 2012, the oil and gas industry as a whole directly employed 51,000 people just in the state of Colorado, paid an average wage of $74,000. That's 49% higher, right? Half again higher than the average of all the other industry wages. They contributed more than $3.8 billion in salaries to Colorado households, paid severance taxes of over $163 million, and paid $273 million in royalties to state and federal governments, and almost $160 million of that staying in Colorado. And all the while, as Marty said, driving down energy prices in Colorado and putting more dollars in people's pockets to spend on their children, on their small business, on hopefully a natural gas vehicle, on what they choose to spend it on. The average annual household energy cost in the state of Colorado is $1,500, rough justice. That's what the average energy cost is. That's 23% below the average for the rest of the United States, and that's adjusted for temperature and climate. Colorado's natural gas production can heat and power 18 million homes. Now, obviously, we're a big exporter because we've only got about 5.2 million people. It's a prodigious resource. And these are just some of the quantifiable metrics. When you look at the overall, the spin-off benefits and accessory benefits, you go even beyond that. I think they're also more abstract and perhaps less concrete but in no way less valuable benefits of natural gas in our lives. I think and this might be stretching a little bit, but I came out here as a geologist in 1981, had 5 great years, and got laid off in '86. And well, it turned out I wasn't quite as good a geologist as I thought I was, or at least as felt I needed to be. And I ended up switching into the brew pub business. I went, CO2 is not just dissolved in oil; it's also dissolved in beer. I went from one carbureted fluid into another. But I did, in that process, become and understand what entrepreneurs were about, and became really a serial entrepreneur. We started about, I think, 16 or 18 different businesses, all of which are still in business in different places. I've sold all of them at this point. But when you see inexpensive energy, you recognize that as that cost of energy goes down in a great many different businesses, it makes the opportunity more attractive. In other words, when you're trying to pencil out risk and reward, the reward gets a little better and the risk gets a little lower. You need less money up front, and you're going to have a little bit better margin on the backside once you get going. And I think you see that across the board. Driving down the overhead, by which I couldn't ask for better props, let me just tell you. And those on the margins, when you're really trying to start a business, that does make a difference, right? That a little bit lower cost and then a little bit higher margin in the end. I think you could say there that inexpensive natural gas is making entrepreneurs more viable and more successful, and in a way you could say it's helping fuel the American dream. We know that demand is only going to increase. According to one industry expert, we saw global energy demand is going to grow by more than 1/3 between now and 2030. That's global energy demand. Obviously, the developing world is growing at a much faster rate than we are. And we also know that natural gas is the fastest growing fossil fuel, roughly 2% annually. And again, let's make no bones, it's because it's inexpensive and because it's increasingly available. And I saw a map a few weeks ago that looked at potential natural gas reserves, not just in the United States, but around the world. And it's pretty exciting. And some of the reserves that people are looking at in, kind of around the Arctic are, if we can figure out how to get that gas out safely, it will be game changing. And I think that opportunity to drive a long-term change in everything that natural gas does is huge. There's always going to be a dynamic between, and certainly in this country, it's becoming more pronounced, but as we become more affluent, people pay more attention to the issues around quality of life, and especially health. If you look at the number, at where people rank health and their health, their quality of life, in terms of their priorities, it's been an increasingly important part for 20 years, and the safety of the environment comes right along with that. And there are two issues around, not just in Colorado, but I think in the entire United States, two issues that get often lumped together. One is the land use planning. As we have better technology and affordable drilling becomes more successful, we open up opportunities that are in places, in relatively close to suburban communities that never had to experience that before, and they get very concerned that, again, that sense of not wanting to risk what they know and have something what they perceive as foreign and somehow dangerous coming into their community, that's very powerful. The other part of it, which is often lumped together, is the environmental, is this really affecting their air they breathe or the water they drink? And too often those two issues get lumped together. I think it's important to keep focused on separating them and work with communities to make sure that they understand that an oil and gas rig is only there for a relatively short period of time, and the collecting facilities and production facilities can be made with a very, very small footprint, and can be done in such a way that fugitive methane, some of the other risks are the possibility for that is reduced to a ridiculously small level, and that we focus on some of the long-term benefits, some of the stuff what Marty was mentioning, that compared to coal, natural gas emits half as much CO2, half, right? You want to talk about long-term effect on the health of people and the people that suffer from asthma. You go through all these things. Being able to use more natural gas and reduce the use of coal it's a very powerful argument that we haven't made enough. The fact that natural gas reduces carbon monoxide and emissions of particulates by 90%. Again, talk about asthma, talk about smog, quality of life. These are big ingredients. Natural gas emits 80% less nitrogen oxide, the legendary NOx. I'm toying with the idea in our office of getting rid of all the acronyms, right? No NOx, no LOX, no bagels. That we're just for 6 months go back to talking about carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxide, just to remind us all that these are real compounds, real gases, and get people back to the reality of it instead of just the formulaic responses. So far, my staff has not bought into this at all. But as I tell them, I am the governor of the entire state of Colorado, and we'll just see. So natural gas emits 80% less nitrogen oxide than burning coal. It emits virtually 0% sulfur dioxide, and that is in where you find the neurotoxin mercury. These are statistics and powerful statements that if we say them, and again, I think it's important not to always be talking about NOx. The people on the street, they don't know what NOx are. They don't know what SOx are. No, we don't mean SOx, we mean sulfur dioxide. Oh, most people aren't too sure what sulfur dioxide is, except they know it's bad. SOx, NOx, that doesn't sound so bad to most people. And I think using the chemicals allows people to have a reality of what they're avoiding by, as a community, investing their will in inexpensive natural gas. I think we have a real opportunity, and I think this is the next 2 or 3 years, to turn public opinion around and let people really see that natural gas is one of the greatest natural resources this country has, and has untold potential to improve quality of life in the United States. So that may be the reality, but as you know, and certainly anybody who's watched Washington, D.C. for the last several years anyway, but especially the last couple months, it's a bit of an understatement to say that they're having trouble finding consensus about anything. And if I were trying to pick 3 C's that we try to use, all the time in our administration, but I would really try to spread out even as far as Washington, D.C. But my 3 C's would be collaboration, right? And just forget about R's and D's, but let's sit down and talk about shared values and then work towards solving problems together. And part of collaboration, by necessity, involves compromise. And any small business person knows that you're always going to have to compromise. I never sold a hamburger in one of my restaurants. I didn't know in my heart it was worth more money than the public was willing to pay, right? Always wanted to raise prices, but if you raise prices, then they go somewhere else. So it's a compromise. Every day, every decision a business person makes almost is a compromise. Well, that should be part of our collaboration. So collaboration, and then compromise, and then common sense, right? Let's not get swept away by the rhetoric or the emotion of one instance or one fact or one event. And I think that there's, I got in a lot of trouble. I said that, those knuckleheads in Washington, and I don't personally calling people knuckleheads. That's not that bad, is it? there's a lot worse things I've seen on the blogs that people have been calling people in Washington. But I think that sense or that lack of sense, that lack of common sense that we've seen on both sides of the aisle, right? I'm not saying the Democrats or the Republicans have any kind of a monopoly on good sense. But if you can't, or you're not willing to collaborate and then try to work through compromise, and within that process, trying to keep a shared commitment to common sense, we're going to have a hard time getting through all this stuff. And I think seizing the opportunity that natural gas presents is going to require all three of those. And I think, to a certain extent, Washington isn't going to be the place it gets done. I think it's going to be in states. I'm the chair this year of the Western Governors Association. I will be the chair next year of the National Governors Association. And part of what we've been working with, and Governor Fallon in Oklahoma and I have been I love that woman. She is a grounded, hands-on leader in a very conservative state, but she's not tied down trying to be conservative or appeal to, on any issue, one political faction. She's trying to get stuff done. And when we went up to Detroit about a year and a half ago, or maybe 16 months ago, and we, showed up, and we were meeting with the senior vice presidents of Ford and General Motors, and Honda, Chrysler, and just saying, we've got 22 different governors signed up saying that they will dedicate as much of their fleet as they can to compressed natural gas vehicles, or some of the bigger vehicles that we can get the stations liquid natural gas. That we're trying to build this market, but we need a partnership from Detroit. And you should have seen, I swear to God, we had some of these senior executives look at us and say, well, Governor Fallon, aren't you a Republican? And Governor Hickenlooper, aren't you a Democrat? And, I'd laugh and say, well, a lot of people don't think I'm a very good Democrat. And Governor Fallon would look and say, well, a lot of people don't think I'm a very good Republican. But we were there side by side, and that in itself made a statement, right? That this is something that's an opportunity for this country that shouldn't be defined by partisan boundaries. And we asked them, what would it take to build some more, off the assembly line, original equipment, natural gas vehicles? It was real, it was kind of a chicken and the egg thing. And the challenge, what we said, give us a good deal. If you make it, we'll buy it. And we started putting together purchase orders. And, again, slow. The first year, I think Colorado bought 80 natural gas vehicles, or 100. Because at the same time, we've got to go and make sure we have enough fueling stations around the state, and we're expanding those every year, making sure we get a better network of people that do have natural gas vehicles. And that once we get that in place, and again, get some of the issues around torque and acceleration for our police or our state patrol fleet, some of those issues which are easily solvable, we made the commitment that we would start buying a couple thousand vehicles a year, and that this would happen in state after state after state, but we needed them to be a partner. And they've been great. I have to say that we had as warm a response as I could have ever hoped. And they were very candid. They said, even as we make these decisions, it's going to take us a year, 2 years to change and retool assembly lines. It's a huge investment for us. You've got to understand, we can't be as nimble. Actually, it was pretty funny saying, we can't be as nimble as you politicians are with public policy, that was the guy from Ford. You can see why Ford's been doing so well. The guys had an interesting perspective and had a great sense of humor. Anyway, I feel very comfortable that over the next few years we're going to have a broad cross-section of natural gas vehicles. I think we're now seeing that there is interest from the convenience store industry and the truck stop industry of expanding to be able to add more natural gas fueling stations. It doesn't cost a ton of money. There's still a bunch of issues we're working out, but it's like President Reagan said, there's a pony in there somewhere, right? And we're getting very close to it. The biggest part we wanted to make sure was that we were getting these vehicles at an affordable rate so that we could really go to our taxpayers. And ultimately, once we get this going, we want our citizens buying these cars, right? That's why when GM started talking about making an Impala that was going to be bi-fuel, that's exciting, right? That's because that's where you get to go to your citizens and say, how would you feel about for the same cost of the car you were going to buy, saving $500 or $600 a year in fuel. And let me tell you, I haven't met a person yet when you don't give them that possibility that their eyes don't light up, and they want to make sure everything's equal, and they're not losing, capacity for distance on their trips, or that they're going to run the risk of not being able to find fuel for their vehicle. We're fixing all that stuff. I think that when we first made our purchase in Colorado, and we said we ended up with mostly 3/4-ton pickup trucks, we certainly would have bought a bunch more vehicles, but we had so few options. Now, as we see what's coming down the pike, we will increase our orders exponentially. Other states, well, it's, when I was with Governor Fallon a few weeks ago, and I was talking to her, the head of her energy department, and he was describing, they provided, and I'm going to steal this idea. That's one great thing about governors and the National Governors Association. We love to have people steal our ideas, and we love to steal ideas. Anyway, they went into their the Department of Transportation, and they offered these guys incentives to go into the small, the only natural gas vehicles that they had at that time were compacts. So a lot of these guys are 6'2", getting into, I can't even remember what the model was, whether it was a Honda or a pretty small vehicle, but these guys were getting half of all the money they saved the state of Oklahoma, right? And she said, or he said, that her head of the Department of Energy said, "You've never seen so many big people so happy to squeeze into a small car." And I think that's, those are the alignments of self-interest, right? Where the way the world changes is when you take people that think they have a little narrow self-interest, somebody who's working out and driving a lot of miles for a state job every day, and they think that narrow self-interest is really, them having a nice big car and having a good life. But then you show them, well, if you look at a broader self-interest, we want to save energy and taxpayers' money, we want to have the air be a little cleaner, and we're going to give you a little more money. All of a sudden, that broader self-interest becomes pretty attractive. And I think that that whole opportunity is just going to expand to the other states. And originally we talked to those 22 governors. Everyone but one of them their states were producing natural gas. I think the tipping point is going to happen when all of a sudden all the governors get involved and we all start doing fleet purchases together. And it doesn't matter whether you whether you produce natural gas in your state or not, because your citizens are getting a savings, and it's dramatic. So I think, this notion of seeing how well we collaborate together. A friend of mine, Alex Bogusky, is a big advertising guy up in Boulder that had a company called Crispin Porter Bogusky, I think 800 employees. They were part of the turnaround for Ford and Burger King, a bunch of these companies. And he said that, he said, collaboration is the new competition. And what he meant by that is that competition, we always have thought that competition is what drives our economy, drives business. Sure, that's fair. But when you get to a certain level, being able to collaborate within, again, we're not trying to create monopolies, but those places, like driving a whole new market around natural gas, using collaboration to do that, that can drive our economy every bit as much as competition ever did. And I think it is, collaboration can be the new competition. It's that sense, and I knew this even back when I was in the bar business, in the brew pub business. As an elected official, I got to remember not to use the bar business, because that sounds a little more sleazy, or not sleazy, but more, just a little more difficult. Let's put it that way. I want to make it clear that every one of our taverns is a better word, we all had a full menu, always served dinner. We were not bars in that awful sense of the word. Anyway, we understand whether you're building a bar, building a natural gas market, building democracy, collaboration is how things get done. It's how the world changes. And I think it's critical to innovation and changing what people understand as their status quo. Even if you change anything, right, go to a different kind of fuel for your car, all change involves loss, right? And that loss has to be processed. I don't think mourning would be the wrong word, but you do have to if you're going to really spur innovation, you've got to recognize that that's going to involve people, losing what they're accustomed to. And for many, not everyone, but for many people, that's very difficult. And I think that as we begin to recognize some of those factors that surround the resistance to what seems obvious to a lot of people, we're going to start having, more filling stations and more natural gas vehicles and more opportunities within the entire transportation category. You look at, and Marty touched on this, commercial vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, maritime, big rigs, ships. There's a lot of potential there, and I think that, that becomes the transformational nature of inexpensive natural gas just goes quicker and faster. Marty alluded to this. One of the things we haven't pushed, I think successfully, is the climate change aspects. And part of that is so many people in the oil and gas industry hate even talking about it. They don't think it's real. They don't want to talk about it. They're frustrated by the very idea. It's probably not a bad thing to, and the way I try to look at it, and I think it's fair, right? When I first studied geology, plate tectonics, right, continental drift, 6 years before I started studying geology, most of the top geologists in the world didn't believe in it. And then in the course of about, 5 years, the whole world changed, and suddenly everyone did believe in it. So there's these great waves of thought, and climate change, we can't say just because so many scientists are absolutely sure that it's happening at the rate it is and that mankind's activities are a large contributor. We don't know absolutely that they're right, but we shouldn't get lost in that. But I think it's fair to say that, as those people or the people that are most concerned try to carve off targets like the Kyoto protocols, which we didn't even support, but the United States now is halfway towards compliance with Kyoto. We've made more advances in the reduction of our carbon emissions than any of the other countries that did sign Kyoto, but we never talk about it. We don't let people recognize that this is part of the benefit of the natural gas industry. And I think when you accumulate all of our reductions, if you look at all the other signatories to Kyoto, what we've reduced already is almost double their total achievement. That's powerful, right? And you say that to even the strongest person who's most adamant about their protecting the environment and, really concerned about hydrocarbons of any sort. You tell them that, and if they're honest, it gives them real pause. And they say, that's something I hadn't considered, and it makes them look at the whole issue in a different way. We've looked at collaboration, and not just between states, but within our state. The Colorado Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act, which was in 2010. My predecessor, Governor Ritter, ushered that through. I think Jim Carpenter, who was his chief of staff at the time, is here somewhere. There he is over on the side. You should give Jim Carpenter, he took a lot of arrows for all that work. Give him a hand. But what this act does is it really closes down or transforms a large number of coal-burning electrical generation plants operated by Black Hills Energy and Xcel Energy, and retrofits many of them to run on natural gas. And the shift is going to take our state back into compliance with the federal clean air laws. By the time it's fully in place in 2017, we think it's going to reduce emissions, reduce the brown cloud effects by more than 70%, and overall, just within the total sector, reduce carbon emissions by 20%. Those are real numbers, right? Those are facts that are going to, I hope, bring people together around the issue and recognize that, there is so much good coming out of the revolutionary innovations in horizontal drilling and fracking that people are going to look for that compromise and bring common sense to the table. I think it's worth noting that the bill also allowed long-term natural gas contracts between oil and gas companies and utilities. And I remember these discussions going on when I was mayor of Denver and was asking some of the utility companies why they weren't, with inexpensive natural gas, why they weren't willing to do this on their own or begin making these kinds of commitments. And they said, well, we can't get long-term contracts. And that was its own legal infrastructure and partly cultural infrastructure within the two industries. But that we got that passed so that utilities now have more stable fuel prices and a larger or a slower transition in prices, which allows for a more predictable environment for businesses, more stable consumer prices for their product. I mean, those are the benefits we get through the compromises. Now, some of you heard that I drank the frac fluid, and I'll finish with this, just because, you know, I didn't drink the frac fluid because I was thirsty. It really was to try and create an environment where people felt comfortable. And I think, you know, when I became governor, we had a voluntary disclosure rule for frac fluids that got to about 90% of the fracs and maybe 90% of the ingredients. But the 10% unknown was fueling people's anxiety. And through an unusual, just a blind connection, I was able to get Dave Lazar from Halliburton, who's a CEO, came up from Houston, was in our office. And he's as smart as they come, wasn't trying to hide anything. He was very wary and very cautious about disclosing their facts, didn't want to give away competitive secrets. But he did point out that they, you know, I mentioned that somebody had said that I had heard that he had drunken frac fluid. And he said, yeah, they have their latest frac fluid prototype was made of all food-based additives. Anyway, he pulled it out. And really the whole point of drinking the frac fluid was to demonstrate that I trusted him, right? And to try and get to a point where you could get a collaboration, a compromise. And 6 months, maybe 7 months after that, we had Halliburton and the Environmental Defense Fund at the same press announcement, you know, both feeling that both claiming victory for announcing the transparency of our regulations around frac fluids. A huge event, and again, one that people didn't think would happen. But once you get to the where you start collaborating and build that sense of trust, you really can do anything. Anyway, I've gone on too long. They wrote this incredibly long speech. I'll finish with this, just because it is too good, that you know, Theodore Roosevelt, more than 100 years ago when he was president, realized that when there was a lot of anxiety on both sides of an issue, that oftentimes public concerns were valid, but oftentimes those concerns would be expressed in hyperbole and unreasonable senses. And it was Roosevelt who recognized that some of the concerns, as he put it, were hysterical sensationalism based on misinformation, not the facts. And he believes it was the public servant's duty to be mindful of all this whenever possible and to help make sure that the public and the industry find common ground in fact and understanding and move towards a safe and profitable future. And Roosevelt put it, the only public servant who can be trusted honestly to protect the rights of the public against the misdeeds of a corporation is the public man who will just as surely protect the corporation itself from wrongful aggression. And he added this as well. He said, in addition to honesty, we need sanity. No honesty will make a public man useful if that man is timid or foolish, if he is a hot-headed zealot or an impractical visionary. Some would call drinking frac fluid foolish, or going up to Detroit with the governor of Oklahoma impractical. And yet, long term, I think those are exactly the kinds of, you know, the opportunities to build relationship and trust that are going to help us in these next 2-3 years really change the face of America forever and use natural gas to its full potential. Thank you.